I want to tell you how delighted I am to be here today to see you all. Um, I'm not much of an energy and aura kind of guy. I'm a lawyer, right? I former prosecutor and all that. But there is something in the air here this morning that's very moving. Michael Sheeline, Holly Zachariah, thank you for your work in putting this up. It's an honor to work with both of you. One of the things we did for the first time this year, we've got the Huckleberry House. We've got some artists, young artists that have done work. I encourage you to check out the room where their stuff is displayed. I got to meet these artists this morning and hear just snippets, second-long snippets of their stories. But I was so inspired, and I'm just reminded all over again how differently the world appears to each of us based on the journey that we've had. Well, I want to start off by mentioning to you the 6 worst words in the English language. That's just the way it is. How many times have we heard that? And I'm not just talking in the song from when I was a young man by Bruce Hornsby and the Range, or that was later memorably remade by Tupac. But those words say that everything we see around us is never going to get better. It means that wounds will never heal. It means that truth will not overcome lies. It means that grace and mercy will not overcome judgment. And I don't believe any of those things. And in fact, this next line may be some of the most inspiring words from that song. That's just the way things are. Some things will never change, but don't you believe them? Puts me in mind of a phrase from Judaism. The phrase is tikkun olam, and by that you can probably tell I'm not a native Hebrew speaker. But in English it means repairing the world. What a wonderful expression, so eloquent in its simplicity. Because we live in a world that is equally capable of great beauty and great ugliness. It is a place where life can flourish or it can wither from blight. It is a world where human beings are capable of great goodness and great destruction. And of course, where there's great destruction, there is no greater need for repair. Those who embrace the call to repair understand that we all have a say in what the world looks like. By our actions, we choose the world we will live in. Though we will always work to minimize it, we know that there will sometimes be chaos, there will be crime, victimization, brutality. When those things happen, we can shrug and say that's just the way it is, or we can choose to work to repair the world. When I look around this morning, what I see is a room full of inspired repair women and repairmen. As crime was happening, of course, all the rules and norms for that victim who will become a survivor, everything they believed applied to the world and made it safe, those things were vaporized in an explosion of violence, pain, terror, loss. Crime could destroy victims' belief that the world is an orderly, decent, predictable place. And in the midst of trauma, it can seem to that survivor that he or she can never again trust or relax, feel secure, or look to the future with confidence. And that's pretty understandable, actually. Regardless of how it happens, a world smashed to pieces in so many ways cannot be easily put back together. And often, we've all seen this, destruction is so total, so overwhelming, that the victim just has no idea how to even begin recovering, nor do they have the means to do so. And that's where each of you come in with your repair kit. In that toolkit are financial resources to help them with the immediate needs, like covering medical bills, groceries, keeping a roof over their head. There's also expertise to help them understand and negotiate the confusing legal and judicial proceedings set in motion by that crime. And there's counseling services that are so vital to coping with the raw emotional and psychological wounds that they've suffered. But of course, these tools are only as effective as the survivor's will to accept them and use them. And this might be the most special thing that each of you do. Helping them to believe that there's life after tragedy, that there can be recovery after devastation. Because everything depends ultimately on that victim's will to survive what has happened to them, to become a survivor. You cannot give them that will, but you can help them find the embers of hope deep in their heart, and then shelter, coax, feed those embers until they burst into the flames of determination. The other thing you can do is help them to see possibilities that they never imagined for themselves, imagining living free from abuse. Several of the artists that I met this morning, you could see in their eyes that they had only recently begun to believe that they could live free from abuse, and that maybe there were moments where it was hard to imagine. A future that's free from loss, to overcome physical and psychological trauma, to look forward to the next day instead of allowing an awful moment from the past to blot out the future. To me, that's the meaning of this year's theme, empowering survivors to rebuild lives. In all these ways, you are helping to repair the world. Of course, none of us can do this alone, and we can't repair the world for everybody, but we can each do our part, and we must. There's another saying from the Jewish scripture that says, whoever saves one life saves the world. That is you, saving the world one life at a time. I think that saying also contains an implicit warning and some sound advice. Don't saddle yourself with a burden that's too heavy to bear. You can't save the whole world by yourself. It's one life at a time. If you try to save the whole world, you're going to fail, and you'll burn yourself out in the process. We don't want that. We cannot afford to lose you, not one of you. Remember that every step forward is a victory, no matter how small. I hope what I'm saying meets with the approval of our keynote speaker, Ruth Bowdish, who is going to be addressing you in just a very few minutes. Her talk, titled The Science of Happiness, a look at positive psychology in the service of others, sounds like exactly the sort of discussion to begin this conference. Many of our workshops are going to discuss problems that can be difficult to solve, but I know and I hope that you'll keep Ruth's advice in mind as you wrestle with these. I want to close today by talking about a remarkable woman named Nancy McFeely. You probably don't recognize her name, but she had a big impact on the world that I think should be recognized. McFeely lived in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where she was married to a businessman named James Rogers. Nancy had dreamed of being a doctor, but in the 1920s, that was a lot easier dreamed of for a woman than actually accomplished. It still amazes me that she was alive when women finally got the right to vote in this country. How far we've come in 100 years. Well, not being able to become a doctor at that time and place because of her sex, she instead became a devoted volunteer at the local hospital, and that was one of the ways that she helped repair the world. But her influence didn't end there. On March 20th, 1928, she gave birth to a son, and the wisdom she imparted to him would shape his entire life. Some of you might already know or have guessed the name of that son, Fred Rogers, better known to many of us as Mr. Rogers, who had that neighborhood where it was always a wonderful day. Fred talked about his mother many, many decades later when he told an interview near the end of his life how she had helped him deal with the news of tragedies and disasters. She would tell him, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers. This is important, she told young Fred, because if you look for the helpers, you will know there is hope. Nancy McFeely and her son are gone now, but the helpers are not gone. They're right here, right now, in this very room. And that, my friends, is proof positive that there is hope. Enjoy the conference.